It's like everyone on cue, 6:30, and I'll call this meeting, work session of mayor and council to order. Everybody is present. We first have a review tonight's regular agenda. We'll have a moment of silence for Hannah Reinhardt. She was the young woman who had bacterial infection and unfortunately passed away this Saturday. We'll then have announcements. You all received a copy of them in your packet. The pledge to the flag and ceremonial matters. This is Childhood Obesity Awareness Month, so we'll have a proclamation for that. We'll have Joe Williams giving us a planning commission report and Todd Warner giving us a URA report. On the consent agenda, item number A, I'll need a motion to remove item number A from the consent agenda and to postpone that until our next council meeting.
And can I just comment on that?
Yes.
Just the communicating, we're waiting on the lawyer for the nonprofit to communicate. He said his client has come to him and said two things that I didn't think was in the works as far as you guys are concerned, and that was would you consider donating the property over a long term to the nonprofit, and would you consider a 15-year lease? Now we can't do a 15-year locked-in lease. We could do a 15-year commitment, which renews annually. But I told the lawyer I had not heard those terms discussed, that it was really sort of a temporary arrangement, sort of terminable at need of the property for the city's interests. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything on that instruction.
And I told Tony, you know, it's my hope that we will still be able to develop that property sometime in the near future, hopefully within the next 15 years. So I wasn't inclined to go for a 15-year lease. Does anyone on council have any strong feelings about going forward with that?
The piece I think that we're missing right now is Exhibit B to what you have in your packets, and it is what they're going to do to the structures out there, and you know, in order to fix them up as consideration for it. So, you know, I'm sure the length of commitment that we make will adjust what they can afford to do, really, to improve the.
It seems kind of a late time to bring it in. Oh, by the way,
I'm not sure that this wasn't at least something that they started thinking about, you know, after the fact. Really, they've started sort of widening their vision, and it's just they need some instruction.
I can understand if they could put a lot of money into it, but
right.
even so, it's.
We're not asking them to invest. That's something they're doing on their own.
That's right. That's right.
It serves their purpose. All right. Anything else on the Baker's Rock adjoining property lease? Again, if I can have a motion to do we want to postpone it to a date certain, or just postpone it? Do we think we'll have it ready for the next council meeting?
I'd put it back on the next council because they should be finished by that time.
So before the meeting starts, if I can have a motion to remove that from the consent agenda and place it under, it would actually be old business, so can we place it under item number B under old business? Or should we put it under new business?
I don't think it matters. I think it's been on this agenda before one time, so old business is probably the right spot.
So at the appropriate time, if I can have a motion to remove it from the consent agenda and place it under item number B under old business, and then when we reach it under old business, if I can have a motion to postpone it to our next council meeting. Consideration action on agreement for mobile use stage by the city of Grayson, and that is just for the city of Grayson's mobile use. We're doing that just to be neighborly. Does it add this staff? Is that the one we added to?
No, this was exactly the same as it came out. It was a form that y'all just asked for. It's no consideration. It makes it subject to the mobile home policy or the mobile stage policy that you're attaching, that you're working on.
Welcome to Alabama.
I read it.
later in the meeting. So.
Anybody have any questions on the Grayson usage or any objection to it being on consent agenda?
Just make sure they don't strip our signs and put their logos on there.
Inspections before and after. That'll come up in just a minute.
All right, employment agreement for our city manager. Anybody anybody have any questions or objections to this being on the consent agenda?
A lot of objections, but maybe it's fine.
We got
I
one,
figured you wanted to try me for a few weeks. and-
Yeah, let's postpone it till the next time.
there was one question that came from staff on the life insurance policy. It's a policy that's 3 times salary. We didn't really negotiate any change in terms of the compensation of the city manager, so I'm assuming the answer is yes, we want to move forward with the same package, and so.
That was in Mr. Shredway's package, and that wasn't in the contract we sent to Mr. Sanders to review before.
Would Mr. Sanders like to pull that out?
I'm more than happy with the contract. Shape that it's in.
It's the more than happy part, Bob.
You're right. We're just giving you
Happy
an
as a date.
We're
More
just
than
giving you an
happy or-
opportunity to
I'm more
adjust
than
it.
happy with the more than fair contract.
Mayor's nomination, council's confirmation of Glenn Kirkland for the Urban Redevelopment Agency. This is the gentleman that Councilman Kraus gave us the application for before. He had put in for the DDA. The DDA by state law requires 4 members to have a business ownership interest in the downtown development area. Right now, we don't have that, and so the vacancies need to be filled. Because of the vacancies on there, there's 2 vacancies, so those need to be filled by people with business interest in the DDA boundaries. So Mr. Kirkland didn't qualify for that. I called and asked him if he would consider serving on the URA instead, and he said yes. Does anybody have any objections to Mr. Kirkland's nomination being on the consent agenda? Consideration and action on opportunity zone contract. I will also need a motion to remove this from the consent agenda. It will become item number B under new business. And then if we can have a motion to postpone that when we get to it, to the next council meeting. I think there was some back and forth on to who was gonna prepare the contract. We now have that squared away, and we received that today, and we'll get it out to everybody.
Late today, we will get that out to everybody, and it will give us 2 weeks to review and be ready for adoption at the next meeting.
Under old business public hearing, we have the first reading on the Family Garden Center. I'll just need a motion to waive that first reading and to place it on our next council. New business, we have the mobile stage, the actual general use policy. There were a couple of changes from staff.
And I've got copies. It's red line so you can see exactly what, and this was sort of a staff modification after they looked at it.
And what we tried to do, and with the changes, we wanted to make sure of several items. In talking to Lisa and Gay, first of all, we wanted to make sure that the location for where they're putting the stage is adequate and safe for the structure. We wanted to have a pre-use and post-use inspection visit with the user, so we'd make sure everybody knew there was accountability for the condition of the stage both before and after. And I wanted to make sure that we had the delivery and the pickup of the stage for our normal non-overtime work hours, and because we haven't budgeted for that. And basically this is what I felt like was not being overly burdensome for any potential user, but it tightened up the ordinance and it protected our property, which is one of the nicest municipal stages I've seen anywhere. And I think we need to put adequate controls in any time that we decide to loan it out.
Any questions or problems with the mobile use policy, mobile stage?
Does Public Works have a camera?
Yes.
Just in case there's an issue, it's a lot better if you do document.
Everybody good with that? Ready to move on?
Mhm.
Okay. That then brings us to the work session agenda, review correspondence. We did receive a letter, I don't know, Friday maybe, that the LCI project is ready to proceed with, notice to proceed with bids. So it is, moving forward, let everybody know. Any city attorney report?
Just, the only thing I have is the sunshine law. The mayor had asked me to look into what the rules were with regard to our committees or subcommittees, and who has to report both advertising their meetings and doing minutes as you see. And so it does apply. It's sort of easy at one level, that is, if it's the planning commission, the zoning board of appeals, the development authority, the URA, all of those entities clearly fall within the sunshine law applications. Then it becomes a little bit vaguer when you reach out to entities, but when they're dealing with public funds, I would always advise them to qualify for those rules. Now, they can segregate themselves if they're an independent nonprofit into public matters and non-public matters, but you'd have to be really diligent in your agenda items to make sure you kept those things separately. But it's sort of expanded to be almost every meeting of any group that's a city affiliated has to both do the minutes, do the notices, do the advertising, and open their meetings to the public unless they fall within the exceptions.
So I know we've gotten a lot of different groups that have popped up. I asked this with the art commission. I know they had a meeting and they kept the minutes and had an agenda, but also I think this would apply then to some of the other groups that are in a meeting. They need to make sure they have agendas and keep minutes. So if somebody has any questions for Tom.
Now, there are a lot of other changes that we had set up at the beginning of the year to talk about on the Open Meetings and Open Records Act, and we haven't ever done that. I don't know. We talked about some kind of long-range planning meeting. That I didn't know if that was something that you'd want to put on that agenda. But
I think everybody got the packet at the, we took that off because we all had the class or the training or received the packets at, my mind's going blank, GMA conference. So I don't know if there's anything additional that you need to add to that or, we had talked about us and this kind of, the issue came up with the art commission and then I know, we talked about it maybe if stat needs to have a meeting and keeping it public and things like that. So, this would apply to those organizations, not just the council. Anything else on that issue? Brings us to our discussion items, Deep South Classic. A couple of months ago, I met with the organizers of the Deep South Classic. The city has always been a sponsor of this event. It is a basketball tournament, a 2-day basketball tournament at Brookwood High School. At one point in time, it was a tournament at both Brookwood and South Gwinnett High Schools, and it was 64 teams. I think now it's down to 32 teams. They do have some teams from out of state. Last year, they actually had the trolley from Lawrenceville shuttling people, thanks a lot, Tony, shuttling people from the tournament down to Lawrenceville to eat and stay in their hotels and things like that, which was, we were losing that tax base. But anyway, there are new organizers of the tournament this year, and they came to us because the city no longer gives any donations to the tournament. We used to give them a portion of our hotel motel tax. I know that Tony and Butch and I have met with Kelly and we talked about in the future STAT giving a donation, but they've asked the city for some donations now. The chief, Captain Perry, has met with them and right now they use the Gwinnett County Police Department, and the city of Snellville actually is a little bit less expensive than the county for overtime services. So I think they're going to use the city this year to save a little bit of money. Butch met with Mr. Edge last week and I think you all saw the email where he told them we simply don't have the money in this year's budget to give them anything this year. They've asked us to consider that, so I don't know if council wants to consider that. I don't know if it starts a slippery slope, what we'd have to have something in exchange, some benefit to the city in order to give them something. I've told them that, I'll ask staff for that in the future, but I didn't know if there was anything we could do this year, but wanted to bring it to the council's attention in case anybody else wants to do anything with it.
How much money are they looking for? A specific amount or just whatever we're
What
giving?
in the past we've given $5,000. We're talking about in the future giving maybe $1,500, $1,000, something along that line.
And just so y'all, while y'all were thinking about that, those shuttles don't belong to Lawrence. Our relationship is really
Sure.
better than that. We don't come steal your customers. That's a private guy who does.
The last time I was there was 2010. And I was at the finals, and there was maybe 300 people at the thing. You know, I mean, just, I don't know if it's gotten better since then, but we were there giving out trophies, and there was 300 people there. It was the championship game of the tournament. So, and I was there the night before, and there wasn't very much more than that.
Right, well, and I think that's the point. At one point in time, it was huge. It was 64 teams across 2 schools, and over the past few years, they've lost support. And so there are now new organizers. The person that had been organizing it for, I think, the past 4 years is no longer the organizer. And so they're going back and trying to get support, not just from the city, but from several leaders in the community, so.
When I give bad news like that, I like to meet with people and meet with them face to face, and I did that with Mr. Edge. We had a good conversation. He's very realistic. He knows, Tom, that his tournament isn't what it used to be. You know, you can't drive through the parking lot and see buses from Alabama and Tennessee and out of state. People are gonna pump money in our local economy. And I think he understood what our situation was when he left. I don't think he left mad or disgruntled at all.
Now, if we happen to have the city council members have a basketball event against Lawrenceville City Council members, probably raise more money.
That would be a different story. Well, and you know, I don't know if South Gwinnett football had contacted me about the city giving money to do the sticks, and so it kind of does turn into a slippery slope if you start giving, but the request was made, so I wanted to put it out there for all of council. Anything else on that topic?
I think we should pass.
Moving on to the alcohol beverage fee schedule. I don't know if y'all saw in the, I think it was in the Daily Post, the article about Swanee. And this is something, if you go around and talk to some of our restaurants, one of their complaints is with our alcohol licensing. And it is a big chunk of money that is due right after the holidays when they don't necessarily have a lot of money to give. Swanee and some other cities, what they've done is they prorate it. Well, let me back up. They let it be paid in installments. There's also the argument for annexation that if someone were to annex into the city, they would still be responsible for paying the whole license for the year of an alcohol license. We don't have any requirements for proration depending on whether they come into the city or not. So I've asked the city attorney and our planning department to look at this and to see if we can do 2 things. One is to prorate our alcohol fee, so if someone were to annex into the city, they would only pay that prorated portion. And the second part is creating, not a payment plan, because I think an installment plan would cause some unburdensome work on our staff, but we talked with Tony's office and with Mealy about making it due January 1st, but allowing people until March 31st to pay it, or March 1st, whenever our occupational license.
March 31st, I think.
31st. And that will give them a little bit more time to come up with that payment. This will require change to our ordinance, so I've asked that this be placed back on our next councilman agenda with an ordinance amendment. Also, Butch has talked with MuniCode to see about getting this policy placed on our MuniCode so that people can just click on it and they will be aware of what the fee structure
And
is.
that's actually already been done. There is a one-click link for anybody interested in starting a business here, where they can go directly to the fees. Just trying to be a little more customer friendly.
While we're doing this, if we're gonna go into that ordinance and change it, could we do a survey of our fees as opposed to the surrounding area fees and see where we are with that?
Anything else on the alcohol beverages?
You know, in drafting, when you say prorate, these ordinances are all different. Some of them are like quarterly, they take you to a certain place in the year, but when I think of prorate, I do it on a 365 allocation based on the day they're applying. I mean, is that okay with everybody?
It seems the most fair, you either do it by the day or you do it by the week,
Right.
a month, or whatever, I mean, but you still, that's the fairest way to do it.
Okay.
Anything else on the alcohol? You all good? Evermore CID expansion into the city. I think Mr. Brooks made contact with everybody. The step for the city, if we wanted to go forward with the expansion, would be to draft a resolution. Tony made a wise comment that we could have the CID possibly draft that resolution for us and present it to council for approval if there is interest in going forward with that. Do you want to say anything? Does anybody have questions of Mr. Brooks, or comments?
We need to see the resolution before we know what our question.
I know at,
I'm not gonna interrupt you, Madam Mayor.
go ahead. I don't know where I'm going, so you go ahead.
Well, I appreciate you all taking the time that you did to meet with us, with the members of the CID board and myself. The idea is that you all have a study that recommends either creating a CID or expanding the one that you have. The CID came to you all and spent a little time with each of you to talk about what the CIDs themselves, not Evermore, not any specific one, but what it is and what it can do for you all. And if it is the request of mayor and council that we draft such a memorandum of understanding or some sort of contract, then we're happy to do that. I had hoped that members of the council and the mayor might get together and reach consensus. If the consensus is that you want us to draft it then and get it back to you, we're happy to do that.
So let me start the discussion then. I think the issue of consensus is if we were interested in expanding the 78 CID, where would we be interested in expanding it to? I know there was discussion about expanding it to the town center area, expanding it to 124, or expanding it down 78. I'll put out there my personal preferences, and then we can open it up for discussion. Maybe that will start some talking points. I would prefer to stick to 78 at this point in time. I think with the town center area and with our Shop on Scenic people, we're looking for ways to offer incentives to bring businesses into those areas, and I don't know if having an additional tax right now in those areas would be beneficial or help our cause to bring in businesses. But open the floor to disagreements or other suggestions, or?
Yeah, I asked Butch to invite Mr. Brooks so he can give us a little bit of summary about the advantages of having the CID expanded on 78. I go along with what you say, Mayor. I think leaving 124 out of the equation right now, otherwise it becomes such a complex matter. I mean, let's do, in my mind, I'm thinking let's do one thing at a time. If we can address the 78 expansion up to where, what are the advantages? And the reason I asked that you can come in, I appreciate you coming on such short notice, Jim. It's fantastic. So you can tell us what the advantages are.
Well, you know, I think that it will help us draft the memorandum of understanding if we know what you would like to see in terms of a boundary. I've heard the mayor speak, and I've heard you allude to the fact that the preference is to go down 78. That once you all decide what the boundaries are, there's a multitude of work that has to occur in order to see that expansion. You basically pass a resolution that says we are setting this as a boundary. From that point forward, we probably have a year or a year and a half of work that we have to sell the property owners, and not the business owners, the property owners. That's what a community improvement district is. We would be able to sell that. Consensus among that board that I work for is that we can in fact go down 78 far and away quicker than to expand it into your town center, which is in sort of a state of flux as you look at your LCI project and you have other initiatives that are taking place on 124. If we looked at a master plan, and if you come down to CID and you look at our northern parallel road ideas that we're now calling the connector roads, for the simple purpose that that enables us to go after federal funds if we have the term connected road. It is no longer going to be a local road. If we go through that process, we're able to begin to, if the property owners want to go from the current terminal point there, right at the town green, and go all the way to the easternmost city limits, it will be up to us to work that those property owners in order to ensure, number one, that they understand what the CID does. And if we do it, I will commit to you that we will calculate each parcel and tell them directly in terms of dollars based on what that evaluation is today, exactly how much it'll add to that. What does it do for the CID? I hope that it would do a great deal for the city of Snellville and the unincorporated area as we make an approach into the city where there's some measure of continuity from the time they hit the Gwinnett County line all the way to the exit Gwinnett, that we have mast arms, that we have sidewalks, that we have improved access and limited access where it's appropriate, that the city can help set priority of issues because you all will have a member that sits on the CID board. Those ideas are the types of things that we work toward. Probably hadn't read this yet. On last Friday, we just received $500,000 to work our connecting roads between the Walton Court realignment and across High Point and across to Britt from GDOT. About 3 weeks ago, we got $283,000 in addition to our LCI grant for the Walton Court realignment. I was kind of committed when I came back not to say much. Let's just produce something. And so now we're to the point that we're going to be talking about what it is that we're doing. And I think that's where the value added is going to be. I talk to people every day that have not been on Highway 78 in a good while. They are stunned and amazed. You know, we get riding up and down it and we don't see that what has happened. We think that by controlling right away at this point, that any changes to roadways and road beds and adding bike lanes and adding pedestrian safety and that type of thing is going to greatly enhance what it looks like as you go down the road. You know, I'm old as the hills, and I have an initiative. I want to see that from the river, Yellow River, to Walton Court is under contract before I leave. A little bit of a challenge, so y'all may have to put up with me a while longer. But that's what we have to do. We have, for safety and for the idea of avoiding some of the intersections that we have along Highway 78, we're going to have a parallel road system. We're looking on the south side that would go today. It would go from Rockbridge Road down to Davis Drive. Those plans are in the incubator for the CID. But that's kind of plans 5, 6, 7, 8 years out that we're looking at. The continuous flow intersection